and so one of the things that helps us is by making predictions, but the other thing that will help us is by putting specific things into our answer choices. And so, for example, here, I'm going to go ahead and just read this one out loud for us. So it says for number 18, dietitian. It is true that nutrients are most effective when provided by natural foods rather than artificial supplements. I'm like, okay, cool. So we're saying that nutrients are most effective when it's from natural foods and supplements. While it is also true that fat in one's diet is generally unhealthy, I'm like, okay, eating raw carrots, which are rich in beta carotene by themselves, is nonetheless not an effective means of obtaining vitamin A. Interesting. I'm like, okay, what I'm thinking, like, what does fat have anything to do with eating raw carrots? But whatever. Since the body cannot transform beta carotene into vitamin A, oh, here it comes, unless it is consumed with at least some fat. So the two things I want to point out here before we even go on is I see since here. I remember since form because our premise indicator words. And the other thing I want to point out is the word some. Giovanna, what does some mean?
At least one.
At least one. So it's a very mild word. So I have my stimulus here, and now I need to find my conclusion. So what is my conclusion here? Do you know, Joanne?
I think.
What is this person trying to convince us of? Or what claim are they trying to make?
I think they're trying to convince us that nutrients are most effective when provided by natural foods, but I also think that the conclusion has to include the word fat.
Okay, so it is true. I feel okay. So Giovanna, what do you think is the main conclusion? No, I'm not. You're not. Like, it's tricky. What do you think, Giovanna?
I would have said the same thing.
It is true that nutrients are more. So then, what is this fat thing?
Wait.
Have to do with anything?
Eating.
Where's our premise indicator word?
The bot sense.
Yeah. So what's our conclusion?
Since the body. That's a premise, though.
That's a premise. Yeah. Okay. So our conclusion here is eating raw carrots by themselves is nonetheless not an effective means of attaining vitamin A.
Because the body cannot transform beta carotene into vitamin A.
So then why do we include this here?
Because that's a premise. I mean,
it's a premise. It's just background information, right?
Background. Okay.
Yeah, like we're just saying this. Like we're saying, like, this is just a fact. Like, hey, this is true. Like, we're not denying that. But then we say, well, it's also true that fat in one's diet is unhealthy. We give our conclusion and then our support for that. So it's like we provide this to give clarification, right? So we aren't just like throwing out, because if we don't include this and someone just tells us eating raw carrots by themselves is not an effect, I'd be like, okay, cool, whatever. I don't understand why that's like interesting or unique. But when you tell me that it's like better to do it, natural foods are typically better than artificial supplements. But then then you tell me about this fat thing. I see what they're trying to do. They're saying like, hey, this is true, but you have to know this. All right. So I got my conclusion. And so now I'm going to go on to the statement that fat in one's diet is generally unhealthy plays which of the following rules. So I want to find this in my argument. And so it's right here. And so now I want to make a loose prediction of what is the relationship between that claim or that part of a sentence and my conclusion. So think about kind of, for very basic terms, think about like, is it a premise or not? Or think about back to like our parts of an argument. Does it fit into one of those categories? So just kind of loosely think about that. So take 20 seconds to think about that. All right, does anybody have a prediction?
Oh, you said a prediction.
What is your prediction of what that is, Giovanna? What is the relationship?
Well, it's still a I may not be answering the question correctly. I was going back that it was the premise, a concession.
Concession. Yes, Giovanna. Yes.
Oh, okay.
While it is also true that fat in one's diet is generally unhealthy, that's a concession. We're giving into, we're admitting our weakness. Or what did you say? I already forgot what you said. That was so good.
It's acknowledging
the weakness. We're acknowledging that it's generally true that fat is unhealthy. However, in this situation, in order for it to work, you need some fat. Fabulous. All right, so now let's go on to our answer choices. So go ahead and read through these answer choices and put your answer in the chat of what you think is the correct answer. Of doing this. So we're going to go ahead and start with E. And so remember, our example is it's a concession. That's what we came up with. That was our prediction. And so this is a top-down question, so I know I have to stay between the lines and I can't go beyond it. And so E says, it is cited as a bad reason for adopting a dietary habit that the dietitian recommends. Okay, so the dietitian habit is that, you know, you take natural foods rather than artificial supplements. This is not a bad reason for adopting that, right? No, so E is a bad answer. D says it is attacked as inadequate evidence. So we're saying that this statement here is attacked. Is it attacked? I'm like, I don't think we ever attack it. So I already don't like this answer. For the claim that it is attacked as inadequate evidence for the claim that nutrients are most effective when provided by natural foods rather than artificial. Like, no, this isn't even provided as evidence for this. Like, that's just a bad answer. A lot of people pick C, but it says, it is mentioned as a generally accepted hypothesis that the dietitian attempts to undermine completely. Do we try to undermine completely that while it is also true that fat in one's diet is generally unhealthy? Think about how strong that is. Do we undermine it completely? No. So it can't be C. B says, it is mentioned as the reason that is least often cited by those who recommend a dietary practice the dietitian disfavors. I don't even know. I'm like, what? Okay, do we talk about it being the least often cited by those who recommend? And does the dietitian disfavor this dietary practice? Do we disfavor the idea that like that nutrients are most effective when provided by natural foods rather than artificial supplements? I don't think the dietitian disfavors that. So it can't be that. But the A's tricky because it's not obvious unless you take the time to think about it. And so this says, it is mentioned as a reason for adopting a dietary practice that the dietitian provides a reason for not carrying to the extreme.
Yeah. And
so this idea that it's true that one diet and one is generally unhealthy, we're not saying that we're citing it in order to say that, like, you shouldn't take it to the extreme, that you shouldn't consume fat, right? Like, you still need some fat. And so can we see why A is the correct answer here?